Oh, my bad. I had it on mute. I had it on mute. My bad, y'all. I had it on mute. Let me start over. I basically was saying, hey, shalom to the family. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. No sound, no audio. I see that. Dang. I hate to waste you guys time for 3 minutes not giving y'all sound. I appreciate you guys letting me know that I was on mute. Sorry, I rushed into the live, man. My apologies. But we're here to review Black Jews in Africa and the Americas by Tudor Parfitt. You understand? So I'm gonna have to put a clip in the video after it dropped, letting you know, go to the 3 minute 30-second mark to get to the part where there's audio. Forgive me for that, family. But with no further ado, let's get into the introduction to our brother LV Europa. Let's go. Let's get it, man. Let's get it. Apologize for the technical difficulty there. I had the StreamYard on mute. Let me go ahead and start this over and let you guys hear this.
I got a visa, that's one swipe. The change of demeanor, I got that all money, baby. That bitch came with a beeper, cold as a freezer. Heat up in my leisure. I feel like a fever, baby. You know I'm a keeper, I got a visa, that's one swipe. The change of demeanor, I got that all money, baby. That bitch came with a beeper, cold as a freezer. Heat up in my leisure. I feel like a fever, baby. You should know that I'm a keeper. This is a keepsake, and you can keep that tucked away. Some gon' come with the lies. Remember them when you pray. Some gon' cry when they die. You don't worry about the K. Look, I done went through away. My time is short, so I'ma live it today. That shit was real. What happened to them slaves? But you gotta be brave. It's a land of the free. Gotta move like waves. Hey, put the ring to the back. I give them path for the rage. Then I put them on the path to take them all up the stage. I got a visa, that's one swipe. The change of demeanor, I got that all money, baby. That bitch came with a beeper, cold as a freezer. Heat up in my leisure. I feel like a fever, baby. You know I'm a keeper, I got a visa, that's one swipe. The change of demeanor, I got that all money, baby. That bitch came with a beeper, cold as a freezer. Heat up in my leisure. I feel like a fever, baby. You should know that I'm a keeper. This is a keepsake, hey. You can use this right away. Some gon' come with the truth. Honor them when you pray. Some gon' laugh about their life. They don't worry about the lays. Look, I done went through away that level's real where you can use it today. Don't worry about how you're gonna get paid. Lord, keep it fit, take it away, hey. Don't you wanna be free? Remove that rage. There's a path to the light, hey. Don't misuse those ways. Sweet flow with the truth. Gotta move like waves. I got a visa, that's one swipe. The change of demeanor, I got that all money, baby. That bitch came with a beeper, cold as a freezer. Heat up in my leisure. I feel like a fever, baby. You know I'm a keeper, I got a visa, that's one swipe. The change of demeanor, I got that all money, baby. That bitch came with a beeper, cold as a freezer. Heat up in my leisure. I feel like a fever, baby. You should know that I'm a keeper.
Shout out to LV Europa. Shout out to our brother providing powerful, impactful music, you know what I'm saying, that we can share on the airwaves and get that brother name out there, man. Support your talented brothers that can actually do this music thing and take it seriously. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to our brother LV Europa TV. Talk to me nice. Let's get it. All right, so we got Scott Garrett Headley. Yeah, just hit us up on Facebook. You can hit me up on Facebook. Yashu Ben Izakar. It's spelled with a J. You can hit me up on Facebook, or you can go to the Facebook group and leave a comment telling us exactly what you want to do your show on, and me or the CEO can actually host your show, and it'll be your show. You can come on here and speak your mind, give your perspective on the topic that you want to talk about, unabated, uninterrupted, and you can dictate what actually goes on during your slot. Because you asked, can I get on to talk about the slave narrative of Jeffrey Brace whenever you have a free slot? Absolutely, brother. We welcome that. We encourage that. Anybody that wants to bring information or presentation or give their perspective, their testimony, whatever, you can use this channel to do so. We have no qualms with that, and we encourage that type of content and behavior here on the source, because I feel as if a lot of our brothers don't have a voice. Over here at the source, you have a voice. We're not no prima donnas over here. You can use the platform when you want to, and we will try to work around whatever schedule that we have to work around to make it happen. All right, and I apologize for the sound mishap. 3 minutes of silence. I thought I was on off mute, but obviously I wasn't. But we're here now. And before we get started, we want to address the Copyright Act. Section 107 of the Copyright Act provides the statutory framework for determining whether something is a fair use and identifies certain types of uses, such as criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. And we're doing all of that with our book review. We're doing criticism. We're adding our commentary, we're reporting on it, and we're teaching as we go. And we're doing this for scholarship and research purposes. So we're well within our rights, and we're covered by Section 107 of the Copyright Act. That gives us that statutory framework to let us go ahead and review this chapter today. Yeah, appreciate it, man. So we look forward to your channel, your show on the channel, and your presentation and your dissertation of the information. So, I'm excited. I want to see it. You know what I'm saying? So I always be the big fan of information, especially in stuff that, I haven't researched myself, and I haven't looked into that particular person and in their narrative. So we would love to have you on the channel, brother. All right. So with no further ado, we address the copyright. As you can see, the Copyright Act covers us and allows the Source Debate League to actually dive into this book today. Let me share my screen so we get started. And read another chapter in the Black Jews in Africa, because we actually read over here. Unlike our competitors, or we want to call them that, the other guys don't read the books in question. They just reference them. But we actually read these books. As you can see, I've been through this book already. And I just want to bring out some of the things, the highlights from this book, and we can discuss and add our commentary, criticisms, things that we should research further into, look into. So this is a great book to do that from a perspective dealing with Jews, Black Jews, narratives around that. Today we're going to be dealing with Ham's children and the Hamitic hypothesis and the origins of that. That's what chapter 3 is going to be dealing with. So with no further ado, let's get right into it. So as you can see, Black Jews in Africa and the Americas by Tudor Parfitt. Chapter 3, Ham's children. It says the association of Ham with Africa has had a convoluted history and is derived from the account in Genesis in which Noah cursed Ham's son Canaan and his descendants when he discovered that Ham had looked at him as he slept hot, naked, and drunk in his tent. The 6th century Babylonian Talmud construed from the biblical account that the descendants of Canaan were cursed precisely by being made black and degenerate, thus making a connection with Africans. So before we go any further, this idea or concept is coming from the 6th century in the Common Era, Babylonian Talmud, not from any biblical verse at all. Because a lot of people, what happens is they misconstrue what the Talmud taught in the 6th century, and which was echoed and reverberated after this period with the Bible. And so, well, the Bible teaches that. No, the Bible never gives an inference on a curse deriving from this, deriving and dealing with black skin. It doesn't say that at all. If anything, there's a curse dealing with whiteness and white and paleness of skin. We see that in Numbers 12 with Miriam, when she questioned Moses about his wife. She got cursed with leprosy and she was white as snow. That's what the scriptures actually say. You don't have a curse in the Bible dealing with melanation of your skin or you becoming black. That's nowhere in the Bible. This was made up in the 6th century and published to this Babylonian Talmud. All right, so let's get back into the book. The notion that Canaan's progeny would be black and have Negro phenotypical features persisted in some medieval rabbinical writing. The reason for this were that in the same way as the lips of Canaan had jested at the sight of Noah, so the lips of his children would swell. So the children would have big lips, right? And just as he left him naked and uncovered, the children of Canaan would go around naked with their sexual organs shamefully elongated. So these people were trying to um, use eisegesis and put in their own thoughts and concepts on why that certain Africans, in quotation, had certain features like big lips, elongated sexual organs, and stuff like that. They would say, well, that has to do something with the curse of Ham. And what we're going to see that a lot of these people, especially Afrocentrics, you guys are still teaching inadvertently the curse of Ham. You're saying that we were stuck in Africa for 10,000 years. That's a part of the Hamitic hypothesis, the curse of Ham. We were primitive until slavery and colonialism. That's the Hamitic hypothesis. That, like, everything you guys are reverberating on Sonetta, Garfield's channel, is really deriving from this Hamitic hypothesis. All black people are the same. That's coming from the Hamitic hypothesis. That's coming from the curse of Ham, because you think all black people are related through Canaan. So you guys are teaching this inadvertently. Anyway, Benjamin of Tudela, 1130-1173, the great Jewish traveler, wrote of southern Egypt. There is a people there who, like animals, eat of the herbs that grow on the banks of the Nile, and in their fields they go about naked and have not the intelligence of ordinary men. They cohabit with their sisters and anyone they can find. They are taken as slaves and sold in Egypt and neighboring countries. These sons of Ham are black slaves. You understand? So we had this idea, the ideology being pushed that blackness equated to slavery. Why? Because they were saying that these people are the sons of Canaan and they have the curse on them. The curse means they have to be slaves. That's how they were interpreting this scripture and interpreting what they had got from the Babylonian Talmud. In medieval times, the association of Ham with Africa and Africans was not consistent. Even early modern sources were just as likely to associate Ham with the races of giants, pagan gods such as Pan, or with kings' genealogies as with Africa. The descendants of Ham were invoked, for instance, to explain social and class discrimination in Europe, where Ham was identified as the ancestors of the European serfs. So again, that was a variegation with what they were teaching about the descendants of Ham. It wasn't all cohesive. It wasn't all uniform. A lot of what was being said and spread around about Ham was different. So you even had, like, they brought up European serfs, which they would say, well, if you're a slave, then you're the descendant of Canaan, which is, what's the word for it? Not intelligible. Like, you can't say someone, just because someone's a slave or a servant, that he automatically descends from Canaan. And we have this same issue today. We have the same issue within the community today. You have these Latino only Israelites that go around saying, well, we know you guys are Canaan because you're Negroes, and Negroes are Canaan because they were cursed with blackness. So it's like they're using this as a reference frame. They're using the Babylonian Talmud as a reference frame, and they probably never opened the Babylonian Talmud, but they're using it as a reference frame because they're reverberating the sentiments from it. Because you don't find this explanation or description, rather, in the biblical book itself. All right. This comes much later. This ideology comes much later. It says, but broadly speaking, Ham was gradually identified for many people as the ancestors of Africans, as he was, for instance, in the influential writing of Leo Africanus. So we have this ideology being reverberated on the earth that and taught in the earth that all Africans come from Ham. And that's that same concept that we use with modern racial theory. All Africans are the same. But when we study DNA, when we study haplotypes, and we get a grasp on the genome, we can clearly see that Africans are a hodgepodge of Y chromosomes. You understand? It's different Y chromosomes. You have haplogroup R, R1b. R1b is a Western European haplogroup. You understand? You have I there. I is also a European haplogroup. You have T coming from the Middle East. So you have these different Y chromosomes going through Africa. Obviously, they're not all the same. You have A and B, which are the Paleo Africans, your Khoi, Forest People, Bushmen, which are the originals, right? And then you have, of course, haplogroup E, which is the macro haplogroup that shares the lion's share of Y chromosomes because of the bond to expansion. You understand? So there's a variegation of Y chromosomes there. So everybody can't be the descendants of Ham. They can't. Because what a Y chromosome dictates and denotes is who your father is. Your most recent common ancestor has to be a male because the Y chromosomes only come from male to male. And this male that's in question is Ham. He can't make all of these different haplogroups because they come from different males. In other words, you can't have two dads. Lamest terms, you can't have two dads. You can't have two great grandfathers that your Y chromosome descends from. You can only have one line, one direct lineage. So no, Africans are not all the same, even though many people today push that lie. Well, we're all of the African race. We're all the same. That is a lie. That's even being taught in your public schools. That's even being, still echoed in your social circles. It's still being said. And you couldn't be any more wrong. But this is where this thinking comes from. This is where it comes from. This way of thinking, the curse of Cain and the children of Ham being progenitors of all Africa. This is where this thinking comes from. All right. So it says the belief was that the three divisions of the world were populated by descendants of Noah's sons, Japheth in Europe, Shem in Asia, and Ham in Africa. At some of the first encounters between Europeans and Africans, the idea of Ham was immediately invoked. Thus, William Ten Rhine of Deventer, who arrived at the Cape in 1686, wondered about the origins of the Khoisan people who were living there. Did these people spring originally from Ham, the son of Noah, or some Arabs of the stock of Shem who entered Africa later on? It soon became expedient for the object of Noah's curse, Canaan, to be forgotten and for the curse to fall squarely on Africa, identified as a place of the descendants of Ham, as a means of justifying the trade in black slaves. So I'm glad we're reading this today because a lot of Christian groups, in particular, we had Matt Sorrell on, will say, hey, yeah, we're the descendants of Ham. So if you want to learn about your history, read about Ham. But you got to understand something. This is coming from this medieval thinking. This medieval thinking, which pushed that the black slaves, right? The black slaves were slaves due to being Ham. So that became like a genealogical or genetic marker almost. Oh, well, we know that you was a Hamite because you were a descendant of slaves, and we know you're a Hamite because you're black. That's where this ideology is coming from, which is very idiotic. It's not sound, and genetics doesn't back it up. DNA doesn't back it up. Again, the Africans, all of Africa, if you consider all of Africa, it's a hodgepodge of Y chromosomes. All right. So again, it says Western intervention in Africa from the 16th century onward was accompanied by two broad assumptions. The first of these was that black people were too degenerate to create their own history. The second, which was more egregious, was that black people were so degenerate that they were incapable of even having a history. So a lot of y'all are reverberating these sentiments. You are echoing these sentiments when you say anything against the oral history of Africa or any Igbos, because you're like, well, they're lying, they making that up, they can't have that, they don't have a written history, so why should I even consider their oral history? But if you throw away oral history, you're throwing away majority of Africans' past. You are inadvertently saying they're incapable of even having a history when you say stuff like that. And I'm talking to Garfield, Armin Raswad, Timo Cyrus, all of you guys echo these sentiments. Jabari, all you people on Sinetta, you echo this sentiment that came from a racist view and racist ideology that was made to subjugate a people. That's where this is coming from. And you're teaching it proudly. Let's keep reading. In 1784, in a fierce attack on a racist assumption of this sort, Johann Gottfried Herder, 1744 to 1803, snapped that a black man had as much right to think of whites as degenerates as we have deemed him the emblem of evil and a descendant of Ham, branded by his father's curse, which demonstrates what the common thinking of the time was. So this same thinking, this same ideology that was going on in the 18th, 17th, 16th centuries that they used to subjugate us, a lot of you guys are still echoing these sentiments. If you're Christian, you're going with the Hamite thing. If you're pro-Afrocentric, you're going with the Hamite thing inadvertently. Because you're saying we don't have a history. Because every time we bring up the Igbo's oral history or, Dunawas or anything like that of that nature, you got a problem with it. You're basically saying they're incapable of retaining their history. If we say that, hey, we have evidence that our haplogroup was outside of Africa, you got a problem with that? No. We've always been sub-Saharan African. That's reverberating this curse of Canaan stuff. Because we're too primitive to, have advanced technology to do maritime trade, to travel. That's how you're thinking. Which makes no sense if you look and study haplogroup E, the Bantu expansion, and things of that nature. You see that we always been agrarian in nature, meaning we were agriculturalists, and agriculture is the root of civilization. Because once you become an agriculturalist, now you don't have to always worry about hunting for food. Your population grows, and once you get surplus food, you can sit down and actually think and construct ideas. That's why it's the root of civilization. Now you can focus on creating a language with syntax and alphabetics. You understand? You can do all these things. That you're not always running and chasing for food and worrying about dying off as a population. All right, let's keep reading. British attitudes toward black Africans in the 19th century were in part formed in reaction to accounts of French travelers and Egyptologists who had flocked to Egypt after Napoleon's expedition of 1799, some of whom had credited the glories of ancient Egypt to Negroes. Dominique Vivant, Baron de Danone, 1747 to 1825, the French artist, diplomat, author, archaeologist, and one of the original members of the expedition, described the ancient builders of Egypt in Negroid terms as having a broad and flat nose, very short, a large flattened mouth, thick lips. Similarly, the French traveler Constantin Francois de Chassebeuf, Count Volney, 1757 to 1820, observed, how are we astonished when we reflect that the race of Negroes at present are slaves and the objects of our contempt, we owe our arts, sciences, and ... when we recollect that in the midst of these nations who call themselves the friends of liberty and humanity, the most barbarous of slaveries is justified, and that is even a problem whether the understanding of Negroes be of the same species with that of a white man. And to this day, it's a problem when we tell y'all that, hey, from our understanding, Edomites are white or had white children, right? They had white progeny. You have a problem with that. That comes from this thinking, this curse of Canaan stuff. Y'all don't understand that because y'all don't study history. When we looked, I did a video, I did a breakdown on the channel. Phenotypes does not matter, and the phenotypes doesn't matter video. I pointed out that people that share the same DNA, same Y chromosome, meaning we share the same male ancestors. You understand? In layman terms, that's what it means. Same male ancestors. You have white and black descendants of these ancestors. E1B1B is Adolf Hitler haplogroup. E1B1B is also Einstein's haplogroup. These are white Europeans, but we're genetically related to them. E1B1B is our brother's branch, our brother Clade. We're E1B1A. Not every African American is E1B1A, but majority, right? It's the most prominent one. We're related to them. That would mean blacks and whites have shared ancestry. We've been saying that for years. But you have a problem with that because you're following a model, a racist model that was used to subjugate our ancestors. And you're using it today proudly. Because in your mind, a Negro can't be related to white men. That comes from this Hamitic hypothesis. That comes from the curse of Canaan. That's where it comes from. And what was happening during this time when they were studying Egypt and learning that Egypt was a fascinating place, they're learning that, hey, everything that we've been saying about people with this type of phenotype is not true. Because they had arts and science, they had monolith structures, schools, they understood language. So now we have a problem here because we've been arguing that these people are primitive and they don't do anything. All right, so let's keep reading. The gap between Wiley's formulation and general European ideas supported as it was thought by the Bible of the inferiority of black people was too wide to bridge as things stood. Egypt apparently held the key to the conundrum, and a growing interest in the identity of the ancient Egyptians resulted in the publication of a number of books in Great Britain and the United States. Many of these sought primarily to demonstrate that the builders of the ancient monuments could not possibly have been Negroes. Why were they saying this? Why were they bucking up against this? Because they've been teaching for centuries that anybody that looks Negro was primitive, that was unintelligent, that had no history, didn't deserve to have a history, and all they can be is slaves. So when they found evidence of Negroes in a civilization setting, it was like they denied it. They bucked up against it. That's what happens today as well. But it's coming from other people that will be considered Negroes. And that's the irony behind it. That's what makes it paradoxical. You got Garfield, you got Timo Cyrus, you got Elmer Raswan bucking up against people like us saying that, hey, well, we descend from these people that brought in language, that brought in civilization. Why are you bucking up against it? Because we're saying it happened outside of where you think we should be. The Neolithic Revolution happened in the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia, and our ancestors were a part of that because we descend from EP2. EP2 is our male ancestor, our male ancestral group. They were in the Middle East. They were in Mesopotamia during this Neolithic revolution, bringing in agriculture into the world. bringing in all of the Proto-Asiatic languages in the world. They were a part of that. When we tell you that, you got a problem with that because in your mind, we're supposed to be encapsulated by Africa, stuck there for thousands and thousands of years, not doing anything but being there until the transatlantic slave trade. That's where it's coming from. All right, let's keep going. So, one of the arguments insisted that as the Coptic was related to Semitic languages, the original speakers of the language must have been from outside Africa. William George Brown, 1768 to 1813, the English traveler, convinced that the Egyptians were white, even intimated that the mummies were created in part to demonstrate this eternal truth, and wrote of the persons of the ancient Egyptians, preserved as it were entire by the prescience of that people concerning errors into which posterity might fall, exhibits irrefragable proof of their features and of the color of their skin, which is now by the quantities of mummies that have been imported into Europe, subject to the inspection of the curious almost throughout that quarter of the globe. This resurrection of witnesses also evinces that the Copts are their genuine descendants and preserve a family likeness in their complexion of dusky brown, dark hair and eyes, lips sometimes thick, but the nose is often aquiline, and others marks of total dissimilitude between them and the Negro race. So what they were doing was looking at the mummies and basically saying, well, these mummies have a Caucasian cast, right? They look Caucasian, so therefore they're not the same as these other Negro blacks. The testimony of this resurrection of witnesses had enthusiastic endorsement from the clergy. You know what that means? The Catholic Church, these religious places were backing this up at this time. That's what that means. Clearly, if the African Negro was descended from Ham, and if Ham was cursed, how could his descendants have been permitted by the Almighty to create a great civilization? The descendants of Ham could clearly have nothing in common with the Egyptians of old. The concept of the Negro being the descendant of Ham and carrying in his flesh the stigma of Noah's curse permitted the enslavement of blacks following the biblical injunction that a servant of servants shall he be. So this is what they were doing. You're black, therefore you're the descendant of Ham, therefore you're Canaan, therefore you should be a servant of servants. So it's okay for us to enslave you. That was the thinking, which still is being echoed today. It said, but it also meant that the standard Christian monogenesis view of creation was unaffected, as the Negro, as the descendant of Ham, was obviously part of the regular family of mankind. As far as ancient Egyptians were concerned, a solution was found in the biblical passage that explained that they were, in fact, descended from Mizraim, another son of Ham. As Reverend M. Russell of St. John's College, Oxford, observed, in the sacred writings of the Hebrews, Egypt, is called Mizraim, the name of which is applied to Egypt by the Arabs of the present day. As this discourse developed, it became axiomatic that the color black was an outward symbol of worthlessness and degradation. Worthlessness and degradation. Again, this sentiment is what you guys reverberate every day on the channel when you say we are nothing but these people that was trapped in Africa, primitive, naked, not doing anything for 10,000 years. This is where this thinking comes from. In 1857, James H. Sloan, an American Presbyterian minister, noted, all Ham's posterity are either black or dark colored, and thus bear upon their countenance the mark of inferiority which God put upon their progenitor. Black, restrained, despised, bowed down, as the words used to express the condition and place of Ham's children, bearing the mask of degradation on their skin. There we go. So again, this was being taught by a Presbyterian minister. This is what was being taught. Justifying slavery, justifying the treatment of quote-unquote black slaves. This is what was being taught. Bishop Thomas Newton, 1704-1782, Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral and chaplain of George II, drew upon an entry in the Bible dictionary of the French biblical scholar Augustin Calmet, 1672 to 757, based in part on the work by the Persian historian Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, 838 to 923, which explained that the effect of Noah's having cursed Ham and Canaan was that not only their posterity became subject to their brethren and was born, as we may say, in slavery, but likewise that the color of their skin suddenly became black. For they, the Arabs, maintained that all the blacks descend from Ham and Canaan. Where were they getting this from? The Talmud. They came in the 6th century. Tabari wrote this in the 9th century. He obviously is drawing from the 6th century source that created this notion that the sons of Canaan were black and they were slaves. So what they would do, they say, well, all these black people were made to be slaves because they're the sons of Canaan. It says the idea that blackness was an immediate consequence of the curse that all blacks were born into slavery and that all blacks descended from Ham was a useful pro-slavery argument. A useful pro-slavery argument. A useful pro-slavery argument. And you guys are using this same line of logic today. A line of logic that was used to debase and subjugate a people. It says, in this way, to use Whitford's term, a pro-slavery Frankenstein creation was brought into being. The peak in the international trafficking of slaves was reached at the end of the 18th century. This coincided with the growing prevalence of the use of the curse of Ham as a biblical justification for the permanent enslavement of black people. In the United States, where slavery was profitable and permitted, in American School of Anthropology rose to defend its morals and ethical basis. To this end, it was necessary to refute the idea that Negroes had anything to do with the glories of ancient Egypt or with any other expression of civilization or high culture. Samuel George Morton in 1851, the American anatomist, one of the founders of scientific racism and of the American School of Ethnography, maintained that the distinctions between human beings was a question of separate species rather than varieties within the human races. Morton was a firm believer in the polygenesis and thought he could have proved the separate evolution of the world's population by skull capacity. So this is where you get, and I debated Black Jesus Minister on this as well, this was talked about in our debate about Esau. He kept bringing up Negroid, the Negroid state schools, Caucasoid schools, and he was using it to define what someone was. And I'm telling him that's antiquated, that's out of date science. And now we're reading about it here in Dr. Tudor Parfitt's book. This is where it came from. It came from racist thinking to justify what? The treatment and enslavement of our ancestors. So that's what it is. I don't know why these brothers are calling me, but that's what it is. His studies claim to demonstrate that white Europeans had the largest skull capacity and Negroes had the smallest. On the basis of his studies of Egyptian skulls, he concluded that ancient Egyptians were Caucasian, and this seemingly objective scientific methodology won wide acceptance both in the United States and Europe. I had this debate in 2020. This was brought up in the 19th century. This has been refuted. Why did Black Jesus Minister bring an antiquated ideology to a debate that occurred in 2020? That's proof that this thing is still being pushed in the minds of our people. It hasn't died yet. It's still surviving through the ignorance of our people. I had a debate in 2020 with Black Jesus Minister, right? And he brought this up as a point of contention, as if it was sound. And not only is this pseudo-science, it's racist. And it was brought up to debase anyone that would have a Negroid, quote-unquote, phenotype or skull. And you use that. in a 2020 debate. Come on, man. That just speaks volumes. It says, one wide acceptance both in the United States and Europe, confirming as it did the innate superiority of Caucasians as comparing to black Africans, their natural slaves. The heretical argument of polygenesis became rather fashionable by the mid-19th century. In 1848, Charles Hamilton Smith published The Natural History of the Human Species, which argued that Mongolians, Caucasians, and Negroes were the three distinct human types and had a totally separate creations. This that was written in 1848 was being used in an argument in 2020. I just want my audience to understand that this thing is still alive amongst our people, and that's why we work day and night to bring forth the information so we can help add some balance to the game, because there's too much ignorance out there and not enough educators. You understand? Like the Bible says, the laborers be few. The laborers be few. There's plenty of work, but the laborers be few. It's not enough of us doing this. And that's just point blank. It says, subsequently, the supporters of the Confederacy during the American Civil War, 1861-1865, made constant reference to the polygenesis argument, which also attracted Sir Richard Burton, 1821-1890. So the Confederate Army was using this polygenesis argument that we are different people, and that justifies the enslavement of these people. And a lot of you guys voted for the progeny, which is the Democratic Party. You voted for them, and this is their history. This is the exploring Orientalists. Indeed, polygenesis became the thinking man's creed as a derisive passage from the biography of the Scottish anatomist Robert Knox, 1791 to 1862, suggests. Looking upon the human family at large, it might well be asked, were the Southern Islanders luxuriating upon their enemies, warm vitals, or an occasional relish of cold missionary? The Eskimo, peering out from beneath his bare skin coverings like a timid hedgehog, yet feeding with a 40-person stomachic power on whale blubber. The black ebony African in his nude, chewing the sugar cane. The countless family of deep olive sooty and ochre red, grandly feathered and tattooed, some with nose rings like the Durham ox, others with lower lips fashioned like egg cups, or seeking beauty in paint, mutilation, and deformity. Fetish worshippers and other analyzed anthropoids. Were all these sprung from the loves of Adam and Eve, and were they to be hailed of the same stock as Socrates, Galileo, and Newton? So he's looking at these people, the Eskimos, which are the North American Indian tribes that had also dark skin as well, and he's looking at these quote-unquote Africans. Remember, he said they had olive skin, but they had olive skin back then. A lot of people be confused with olive skin. During that time, when they said olive skin, they're talking about brown to dark. That's what they're talking about. If they said you had olive skin, they mean a brownish to dark color, because he's describing Africans, quote-unquote, right? And he's speaking in a pejorative way about them, about their features. And he's questioning if they even came from Adam and Eve based on how they look. This is why I did a video, phenotypes does not matter. You can be related to someone that looks completely different from you. The Japanese, the Tibet, the Ano people of Japan and Tibet, and the Andaman Islanders are a great example. They all are from haplogroup D, M174, and they look completely different. They look completely different, but they're all related. So this way of thinking has been destroyed with the study of genetics. Problem is, ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is abound. Everyone's ignorant. So it's like, even though the studies have been done and these doctrines have been crushed, they still persist today. It says the slavery, domination, and abuse of blacks could be justified even more easily if they were seen to be descended from a founder event that was utterly remote from the springs of Western civilization and outside the rim of Western sacred history. Subsequently, the general Hamitic thesis was bolstered by the work done on the Hamitic language family, and finally, a complex interlocking system that underpinned colonial policy was created from political expediency, race theory, and scientific and linguistic findings. And we still use the race theory to this day. Still classify all black people as the same race. Still do it. Reading on, from the end of the 18th century, biblical history and what was becoming known of the history of Egypt was conscripted in such a way as to make white Europeans the legitimate heirs of these histories, neatly excluding black Negro Africans from the Eurocentric framework, while preparing the ground for conferral of a ready-made history on certain other groups of favored Africans. Now, the key point I want to bring from that paragraph is it says, making white Europeans the legitimate heirs of these histories, neatly excluding the black Negro Africans. This is the main argument a lot of you guys have when we claim to be Israelites or Jews. Well, the Jews are white people. Just look at them. That's your argument. And you're a Negro. Just look at you. Your whole argument is based on how we look. It's not based on historicity. It's not based on archaeology. It's not based on DNA. It's based on how we look. We have plenty and countless videos of you guys saying this verbatim. This is where that thinking comes from. And that's what we're exposing today here on The Source. Hit that like button, subscribe to the Source Debate League on YouTube, and join our Facebook group on Facebook, Source Debate League on Facebook, with the blue background, not with the red background, and add a comment and let us know if you want to be a judge, debater, or you want to present information on the channel. The channel is open to each and every one of you. Back to the book. It says, as the exploration and subjugation of Western Africa continued, and as European commercial and imperial interests changed and developed, and as attitudes towards slavery softened and changed, so an explanation for this history or non-history origins and relative status of different African peoples became more urgently required. The Hamitic theory was there to help out. Ethnographers and theologians now started to argue that the biblical Ham and his progeny, the Egyptians and others, were in fact white, thus claiming the wonders of ancient Egypt for Europe's racial ancestors. A discourse now developed in which only Ham's youngest son, Canaan, was black at all. It was only his offspring that populated sub-Saharan Africa and who were cursed. Who were cursed. So again, this is what you guys teach. That we are the sub-Saharan Africans. We were stuck there forever. And that's it. That's our history. Reading on, Hamites now began to refer to a variety of light-skinned peoples who included the ancient Egyptians, Phoenicians, Canaanites, Ethiopians, and Israelites. And the whole era behind this, the erroneous nature behind this, is based on the fact that you're still judging people on how they look and not on their own genealogical records and their own ancestry. The Hamitic hypothesis became vital. We're on page 34, by the way. The Hamitic hypothesis became a vital tool in the task of differentiating between African societies and the critical colonial task of rewriting African history. At the first encounter, Western travelers were of the view that the people they encountered were undifferentiated. However, it soon became clear that there were, after all, some aspects of African culture and society that stuck out as being different and relatively sophisticated. Explorers and missionaries found a wide variety of physical types in their travels, and through an ethnocentric process, placed particular value upon those that looked most like them. These were declared to be of Hamitic descent and believed to be capable of superior achievements. And this is how you know we're not teaching the Hamitic hypothesis, because we don't teach that the people that we're calling superior have these achievements Ham. We don't teach that at all. And we don't teach it just based off achievements anyway. We teach it we teach who's Shem based off genealogy, ancestral records, oral testimony, archaeology, and DNA. That's what we use. You guys are using the Hamitic hypothesis because you're just basing it off on how someone looks, therefore they have to be X, Y, and Z. It says whatever real civilizing progress Africans had made, it was argued, was due to these foreign invading Hamites. Thus, in a distortion that had some obvious value for invading Western colonists, the high points of African history were presented as belonging exclusively to its historical invaders. A paradigm was established justifying Western colonial intervention in the continent and establishing the majority of Africans, the not Hamites, as inferior, debased, and worthy of subjugation. The idea that the Negro either in the past or present possessed any artistic or intellectual achievement was rejected. And what did I say earlier? You guys are teaching this still. Because when we say, hey, that we were these people doing maritime trade, we find this DNA in Corsica, which is off of Italy 7,000 years ago, you bat an eye at that. You got a problem with that. Why? Why would that make you upset? That your ancestors achieved something great. When we say that the EP2 are the progenitors of the Proto-Asiatic languages, per the PhD, Dr. Muntaza Ibrahim, which is a Sudanese geneticist, why do you have an issue with that? Because this ideology is in your head. Well, we can't do none of that. We don't possess any artistic or intellectual achievement. So you automatically reject it. This is where it's coming from. The Hamitic theory denied him forever the possibility of being in control of his own destiny. The paradigm was designed in Homi Bhabha's phrase to construe the colonized as a population of degenerate types on the basis of racial origin in order to justify conquest and to establish systems of administration and instruction. So that was the purpose behind this. It was used as a weapon to colonize Africa, enslave its progeny, and send them over here and subjugate them and debase them. It says the Hamitic race was now constructed as a subgroup of the Caucasian race and included populations in Northeast and West Africa, the Horn of Africa, and Southern Arabia. The hypothesis suggested that those Africans whose roots could be shown to be outside of Africa or in the northern or eastern periphery of Africa, and thus with close links to lands beyond Africa and who most resemble Europeans, had once been advanced peoples. Even if, with the passage of time and their intermingling with Negro stock, they had degenerated. A good deal of Western investigation of the racial nature of Hamitic tribes was thus associated with the establishing sameness between them and the Europeans and difference between Europeans and Negroes. This was also a way of proposing that these superior Africans had some kind of link, no matter how tenuous, with their colonial European masters and their sacred history, and indeed with the rest of mankind, while Negroid Africans had no such links. J.C. Pritchard, 1786 to 1848, the polymathic British ethnologist, summed it up as thus: tribes having what is termed the Negro character in the most striking degree are the least civilized. The Pepos, Bisagos, Igbos, who are in the greatest degree remarkable for deformed countenance, projecting jaws, flat foreheads, and for other Negro peculiarities, are the most savage and morally degraded of the natives hitherto described. The converse of this remark is applicable to all the most civilized races, the Fulas, the Mandingo, and some of the Dahomis into the Akan nations have, as far as form is concerned, nearly European countenances and corresponding configuration of the head. So again, they're basing it on how people look. Therefore, you deserve to be a slave because you have big lips, big cheekbones, your head is flat or whatever, or what have you. Then you deserve to be a slave. That includes the Igbos, the Bisagos, right? But here's the thing. We teach that the Igbos, a lot of them are Jews. So how are we conforming to this? We're not conforming to this. You guys are. You understand? When I say you guys, I'm talking about these fake pseudo-Afrocentrics and pseudo-intellectuals on the internet, such as Garfield, Timo Cyrus, Amon Swan, and any of the people that support and back what's going on Sinetta. But this is what was being taught during the time of Pritchard's time. And it's interesting because Pritchard brings up the dark Jews of Spain and Portugal in his book, The History of Man, I believe it's called. From about 1850 on, the term race, which had not been much used before, was increasingly employed in the discussions of Africa and Africans viewed through the Hamitic hypothesis. So again, if you're using this racial theory, understand that it's being bolstered by the Hamitic hypothesis. It's being bolstered by the curse of Ham. It's being bolstered by these ideologies that were brought up in the Talmud, in the medieval sector, and the early colonial experience in America. So when you try to subjugate and make everybody fall under that, this is what you're following. Now, it says, whereas the economic dictates of slavery had once required social theories based on the biblical account of Ham, now the panacea of race was used to underpin white domination in Africa. The panacea of race was used to underpin white domination in Africa. And you wonder why people like the early Moorish group, the group that we're a part of, the Israelites group, Rabbi Wentworth, Rabbi Ford, and Cherry, was against the notion of race. They were against the notion and classifications of race, because this was used to underpin white domination in Africa. And you guys want to keep it. You love this classification and you don't want to move or waver from it. And this is the history behind it. Happy Black History Month, by the way. It says, and also to help account for its history in peoples, the Hamitic hypothesis developed into an all-embracing concept that was able to account for a remarkable range of cultural and technical phenomena on the African continent. At the same time, the hypothesis provided the underpinnings for a belief in the technological superiority of white people over black people and white success in conquering and settling almost every part of the world. Robert Knox noted, look all over the globe. It's always the same. The dark races stand still and the fair progress. This is what was taught. The dark races, you Negroes, you guys are stagnant, but the white or fair-skinned people are elevating. They're advanced. That's what they taught. And they based it on how you look. So although there were opponents of the hypothesis, including some black ones by and large, it dominated Western thinking. And it still dominates Western thinking to this day. One of the most forceful proponents of the Hamitic hypothesis as it developed was the British ethnologist Charles Seligman, 873 to 940, whose Influential Races of Africa, London 1930, insisted that advanced features of African civilizations, from irrigation to metalworking to advanced social structures, were the work of Hamites, to whom he refers significantly as Europeans, apart from relatively late Semitic influence. So again, a lot of people say, you guys are teaching the Hamitic hypothesis. We're not saying Hamites did this. We're saying Shemites did it. Anything, we're following the Shemitic hypothesis or Semitic hypothesis. Let's keep reading. He wrote, the civilization of Africa, or the civilizations of the Hamites, its history is the record of these people and their interaction with the two other African stocks, the Negro and the Bushman. Whether this influence was exerted by highly civilized Egyptians or by such wider pastoralists as are represented as the present day by the Beha and Somali, disincoming Hamites were pastoral Europeans, arriving wave after wave, better armed as well as quicker witted than the dark agricultural Negroes. So that's what was being taught. And we teach the total opposite. We teach that these people that was coming down, like in the Bantu expansion with iron metallurgy, right, with these foreign, Southwestern Asian fruits like melons, bananas, and cereals and grains, chickens, humpback cattle, right, which are all Southwestern origin, by the way. There's no speculation on that. We know where they come from. We're Shem. That's what we teach. We don't teach this Hamitic hypothesis stuff, but you guys do. Garfield, you teach it. The Team Osiris guys teach it, and the Amaraswa teach it when you say that we can't be anything else but these primitive blacks that were stuck there until slavery. Or if you teach this modern racial theory, you're teaching the Hamitic hypothesis. Back to the book. We're on page 35 and 36 now. It says the Hamitic hypothesis was a useful tool for explaining away any signs of African social progress, technical ability, or intellectual prowess as residual racial competencies, which originated in the Caucasian world and which thus bolstered the idea of the innate superiority of white Europeans. At the same time, it was the way of rewarding some tribes and punishing others. The labels that were handing out by the paternalistic European colonists stuck. So successful was the strategy of assuming that Negroes were innately inferior to whites and Hamites that within a very short period, black Negro and Africans themselves would see the usefulness of the Hamitic hypothesis as a means of elevating and promoting the importance, splendor, and purity of their own tribe while rejecting and denigrating the claims of others. In this way, the idea developed that light skinned peoples of Egyptian or Indo European origin had in times past spread across Africa, where they still formed an elite in many societies as they had gradually interbred with subject peoples they themselves degenerated. This was the explanation put forth for the apparent decline of a number of African societies, from the Yoruba land of Benin or the areas included in Great Zimbabwe civilization, where once more advanced societies had apparently flourished. Remnants of the peoples who had participated in the great triumphs of the past were still to be found, albeit in a debased form. Part of this discourse had it that advanced groups had come not only from the Horn of Africa, Egypt, or the Indo-European world, but also from the Semitic world beyond and were connected with Canaanites, Assyrians, or Israelites. Now, we agree with the Israelite part because we teach that, and no one's running from that. But what we disagree with is this Hamitic stuff. They were basically saying everything civilized were Hamites. Some would say they were every other son of Ham except Canaan, and the ones that were subjugated are Canaanites, as we read earlier. The attribution under the aegis of the Hamitic hypothesis or any particular extraneous idea to a group was not entirely random and was certainly not objective. The mantle of specific ancient societies was carefully and systematically placed on the shoulders of the more advanced, amenable, and cooperative groups. The construction of their usually remote origins served the purpose of conferring nobility and prestige upon them and often created a powerful bond between them and the missionaries and colonial agents. In this process, nomadic peoples were often singled out for praise as opposed to sedentary groups, as often happened elsewhere in the colonial world. Similarly, tribes that had moved into an area as conquerors, displacing or subjugating other tribes, were often favored and rewarded with an illustrious pedigree, which could have helped explain their military, organizational, and other successes. This process formed a probably unthinking part of the widespread colonial tactic of divide and rule. The favored groups were positioned in an intermediary role between whites and other black Africans and were given an intermediate color coding. As it happens, this color coding corresponds broadly to that given to Jews in medieval European discourse, and since as well in the United States, South Africa, Australia, elsewhere, which placed from them too in the intermediate position between black and white, which is very interesting to me, and I believe that stands out to me because we've done a lot of studies. And even this chapter, his first chapter, brings out the Jews being regarded as black individuals or having brown skin. Let's read on. Subtler distinctions were also created within the Hamitic hypothesis based upon biblical ideas and upon comparisons with ethnologies of the Bible. The religious and social systems of favorite groups were frequently compared to features of the religions mentioned in the Bible, and the assumptions was often made that such and such religion or cultural trait was derived directly from an Israelite model, from the worship of Baal mentions in the Bible, or from the biblical description of the Moabites, Canaanites, or Egyptians, or from other individual or people referred to in the scriptures. In other cases, myths were invoked based upon classical models from lost Roman legions making their way south from Egypt, or upon the imagined wanderings of Alexander the Great and his armies in the African interior. It was This very way that paradigm was created that will be used time and again in the invention and construction of Jewish and Israelite identities throughout the African continent. All right, so let's keep going. It might be the end of it. The racial construction of Jews and Israelites throughout Africa overlaps with racial constructions of Hamitic pedigrees inherited in Hamitic hypothesis. But Jews and Israelites had been constructed in Africa long before the introduction of scientific racism at the beginning of the 19th century. So that's key. A lot of people saying, well, these people wouldn't think they were Jews until this particular point. That's not true. Again, Tudor Parfitt is an objective scholar. He's showing you pros and cons. Pros and cons. He's not saying, oh, this is all made up, all false, like a lot of you guys are trying to push. And this is why when he went to Garfield's channel and had that interview, Garfield had egg on his face because the man was telling him, hey, these African Americans, they have a claim. They have merit to their claim because some of these Jews could have been sold as slaves and distributed through the Americas. He said that. So anyway, again, these ideas of there being Jews in Africa existed way before the 19th century. It says from the first moments of colonial intervention in the continent in the 17th century and long before the range of medieval discourses. So before the medieval times when they were bringing up this curse of Ham stuff, before the colonial intervention, before any of these periods, you had the notion that Jews were in Africa. This act of racial construction was linked rather with the construction of Jews and Israelites out of local populations as an act of symbolic othering, which exported known minorities and the frontiers they represented throughout the colonized world from the Pacific Islands to the Americas. All right? Like we said, we read over here. We read over here. Tune in for the next part of the series. We will be dealing with Chapter 4, Judaic Practices and Superior Stock out of Black Jews in Africa and the Americas by Dr. Tudor Parfitt. Let's go. Let's get it. You know what I'm saying? And before we leave, I always like to go to Sarah Taib Carlene's book because it's just a quick cut to show what Tudor Parfitt said was true before any of this intervention happened. Before the colonial ideology happened about race, before the medieval intervention of the curse of Canaan and that being spread throughout the world, you had Jews or Israelites in that region. Was it Sarah Taib? You're not gonna pull it up. Jews of North Africa is the book. And just the back, land me back on what Tudor Parfitt was saying. We're just going to go to her book real quick. There you go. Read. And we've read this. I pretty much read this because it's pertinent to keep reading this because it just shows you that what he's saying is true. And if you go to the beginning of the book, let me get to it. Not the preface, introduction, past that, right here. Chapter 1, the pre-Islamic period, and you read about the Carthage and Phoenician period from 813 to 146 BCE. It says the Jews are described as being native to North Africa, almost as part of its flora and fauna, flora meaning plants, fauna meaning animals, ever since historians and archaeologists started to write on this region with regards to the foundation of Carthage in 813 BCE by Dido. And we know Queen Dido is a relative of King Ahab and Jezebel, Queen Jezebel. All right, so we're going to go from page 16 all the way to the Roman period, 146 BCE to 430 CE, 18 to 19. It says in 146 BC, the Romans conquered Carthage and settled in the most fertile regions of North Africa, which they proceeded to spread abundantly with salt, attempting to destroy all traces of the Phoenician period. To no avail, because according to St. Augustine, many centuries after the fall of Carthage, the peasants still spoke only Punic and practically not a word of Latin. Roman culture and language therefore never replaced the Phoenician culture and language that had everywhere taken root. This is probably due to the fact that the Romans literally reserved civilization to the cities, as per Lopez. But as Lopez mentioned, these Roman cities were too small, less than 2,000 souls, to promote the expansion of a great culture. Now, here's the point. According to St. Jerome, under the Pax Romana, the Jewish communities underwent a great prosperity all the way from India to the western tip of Africa. So we know prior to that, during the Roman period, we know for a fact that we had Jews, and prior to the Roman period, we know for a fact we had Jews in Africa because of Dido and the Phoenicians coming into Carthage in North Africa. We know that. That's known, cemented history. So when he said that this idea that Jews are there, it exists long before these racist theories of the curse of Ham and polygenesis, that these people are not even human, they're a different variation, they're a different species. Before any of that even hit the scene, we have Jews penetrating Africa and radiating and creating communities. All right, it says their numbers were boasted as well, about 30,000 Jews that Titus, a prominent general prior to becoming Roman emperor from 79 to 81, had deported from Israel to North Africa after the fall of Jerusalem and destruction of the Second Temple in 70. By this time, there were scattered all over North Africa a large number of Jewish communities who had taken refuge there, or who, according to Josephus, had been enslaved and subsequently redeemed by their co-religionists. The Jews built synagogues and elected leaders who strove to endow the community with a strong, efficient foundation. This chain of events occurred once again following Bar Kokhba's insurrection from 132 to 135. The failure of his revolt led directly to the expulsion of Jews of Israel who had been enslaved and redeemed by their North African brethren. And again, where were these African Jews? They were from the western tip of India from India to the western tip of Africa, according to St. Jerome. It said the Romans were sometimes tolerant towards their Jewish and Berber subjects and sometimes quite cruel. The massacre of million Jews in Judea by Titus in 70 during and following the siege of Jerusalem triggered many rebellions in the ultra-religious Jewish community of Cyrenaica, which according to Josephus numbered over 500,000 people. These rebellions were repressed so harshly that the Jews were almost completely exterminated, weakened, embittered, and overwhelmed by the inhumanity of such rule. The Jews drifted away from Rome and moved closer to the Berbers. So they were going deeper into Africa at this time. It said Marcel Simon notes, however, that later on the Severus Roman dynasty, 193 to 235, because we know Septimius Severus took down the Roman Empire, right? It says a dynasty of African origins and Semitic culture was openly Philo-Semitic. Under the Severi, the Jews underwent a period of prosperity during which they were able to spread their beliefs throughout the Roman Empire without any restrictions, and especially among the Berbers. All right, so that's why I wanted to bring from Sarah Talib Carlene's book, Jews in North Africa, from Dido to Degal. Great evidence that we were always there, going all the way back to the 9th century BCE, to the Roman period, and to present time. And that's what we're reading about in Tudor Parfitt's book. All right. So that's another chapter down. Like I've been saying, we read over here. That's what we do. Hey, shalom, Brother James. He said they're going to flag our video for speaking against their Democrat overlords. Right. You got to understand that the Democrat Party has roots in slavery. They were the party. They were pro-slavery. They were against the Emancipation Proclamation. They was against the freeing of the slaves and making them citizens. They were against it. They are the reason that we don't have a 40 acres. We didn't get 40 acres and a mule. They're the reason. They voted against that when it was proposed in Congress. The Democrats voted against it. They created black codes to keep us poor. They over-criminalized us. We can go through that history, but this video is not about that. We just mentioned it because it was brought up in Tudor Parfitt's book that they were strong proponents of this race theory, saying that we deserve to be subjugated. And you wonder why they push a lot of policies that they push now to keep us keep our children going from the school system to the prison pipeline. Because again, the only way that you can legally do slavery in America now is through incarceration. So we see that same thinking being reverberated and echoed throughout the earth. Hey, shalom, Ramal Yahoo. Pumantis, shalom, man. Shalom, brother. Appreciate it, man. You in every video, brother. We appreciate your support. Yeah, man, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, man. Let's get it. Shout out to Royal Prince. Shalom, brother. Yeah, we're going to complete this whole book. Right. Truth over everything. Shalom, Royal Prince. Shalom. A tall head says, Jake don't like to recognize that we have quite a few ethnic groups in our gene pool, including some Hamites. That is true. That is true. No one's denying that. In our model, A and B, haplogroup A and B are Hamites. Abraham brought all this to ancient Kemet. Royal Prince, I'm assuming you are referring to the book of Josephus or Josephus' works. Shalom to James, the argument king. James says they don't like to look at genetics because they don't even understand it. That's a fact. They don't understand it. Right. Game Amp Me says ripe olives are brown and black. Yes. So when you go back to the 18th, 17th century, when they said someone has olive skin, they're talking about being brown or black. You know what I'm saying? Today it might mean something completely different, but during those times, if you read these old archaic papers, when they say that a person had olive skin, they're talking about someone being either brown or black. That's just evident. James says, them Afrocentrics be trying to teach when we came from Egypt, just like the Hamitic hypothesis says. Exactly. You're basically mimicking exactly what was being taught in the 1800s, 19th century science stuff. The same exact thing, same racist things, man. Right. They still think we deserve to be subjugated today, man. It's just crazy. It only makes sense. Why would they go to the level to make us a permanent underclass? Why would they make sure that, okay, let's take away charter schools from Black Americans? Why would they do that when Black Americans are doing well in charter schools? We have a lot of examples of Black American kids doing better in charter schools than public schools. Why would you take away that option? Because they're relying on the school to prison pipeline to feed their multi-billion-dollar industry, which is the prison industrial complex. That's the only way you can do slavery legally in the United States of America is in prison. It's just like the same mindset they had back then. Why are we going to let our commodity go? This is your commodity. Families are feeding off of slavery. They are getting rich off of slavery, and this is their livelihood. They're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure they maintain it. Same thing with the private industrial complex. They're going to fight tooth and nail to maintain that industry because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. That's why they're doing it. It's not rocket science. Follow the money. Ramal Yahoo says, but why don't Ashkenazi have Egyptian in their blood? Why don't Ashkenazi have Egyptian in their blood? You got to clarify what you mean by that. I don't see a lot of some Ashkenazis have the same haplogroups as us. King James says, Shalom, fam. Great information. We them bruised. Yeah, man. Shalom, King. Royal Prince says, yes, because Abraham came from Sumer, Mesopotamia area. That's a fact. That's a fact. It's a fact. According to Josephus, that's a fact, man. And you know what I'm saying? If there's no questions or anything y'all want to add, I'm gonna close it down. I like having these videos an hour and a half, make them rewatchable. Yeah, he would be considered Asiatic. A lot of people need to understand this. Just because you're from a geographical region don't mean you're of a particular race. People move, migrations happen, wars happen, famines happen, slavery happens. If you get enslaved and move somewhere else, then how are you gonna say, okay, these people in Spain are all the same? No, you can't say that. Don't work like that. People make people, not land. Land is sterile. Countries are sterile. They don't reproduce and make people. You understand? All right, so I'm gonna close it. I'm gonna close it out. I'm gonna close out with a song from my brother LV Europa. Show the Firehouse some love. Show the Firehouse some love, man. Let's see. Man, I appreciate all of y'all, man. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Let's support, those that read, man. A lot of our people not reading. All right. Let me share my screen so we can show some love to our brother LV Europa. Talk to me nice. Let's get it.
Europa Report TV, man. A little bit of something for everybody. Yo, test it. Just turn me up just a little bit. Yo, welcome to the interlude. Get it. When a passion hit the pad and turn to interviews, I might ask a question or two that bang on the interview. But this gon' separate I from what the sinners do. Even rooted in hatred, I shift the mood. Shorty read a Bible verse, yeah, this shit was cool. But I spit a sweet 16 that'll fill her up like food. And when the chef in motion to interrupt is rude. Pass me a plate, still so passional states in the passenger seats as we pass to the race. If the rose was gold, why is it cash that you chase? Built it brick by brick, even my casket is safe. More than secure, I spit more if it's pure. They ask why I do the will. I just tell them it's my chores. Hit a choir, sing the chords. Stay on pitch to be mature. What's it for? You gotta stay tuned to see more. Hey, let me ask something. I might spare something. Hit the mall and just grab something. Yo, let me just ask something. I might hit the mall and just grab something. Run up in the bank and just bag something. I was in the streets, saw my last button. Yo, you ever sold dope before? Ever watched the green grow like a bubble saw? With love you can heal. Spin the wheel, gotta hope for more. Don't hold to a grudge you can't peel on an open sore. Gotta bend like a flower, but stay true to form. The world is your stage, and even you must to perform. Even when they hate, it's great. You gotta keep the calm. The truth don't bend, but gotta bend just to keep it formed. Is it important when your mind start important? Would you download the kids? Talk about distortion, but you firm in your belief. Your poison will be poison. Don't talk about relief if the streets where your boys is. If family matters, we can bypass the chatter, cause what matters is when we here for the hereafter. Have you heard? I heard the future will bring laughter, but you gotta close the books and live a new chapter. Hey, let me ask something. I might spare something. Hit the mall and just grab something. Yo, let me just ask something. I might hit the mall and just grab something. Run up in the bank and just bag something. I was in the streets, saw my last button.
All right, man. Subscribe, man, and like that brother page, man. Support good music. Get this brother out there. You know what I'm saying? The source, we support LV Europa. We support talented rap acts and artists and musicians. Let's go. Let's get it. Hey, Shalom, Ahaya be praised. He said, I think he's trying to say the mother of Ephraim and Manasseh was an Egyptian, so they should have an Egyptian autosomal DNA if they are Israelites. Yeah. If he's saying that, then of course. Right. You're right, Ahaya. Shout out to Ahaya, man. He be showing love, man. The brother, really the sixth man of the source. He really be G-checking y'all in the comment section. All right, Shalom, see throwers. I'm out of here, man. I'm out. Source gang, 7 gang. Y'all know how we do it. Support the channel. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, Source Debate League. And we will be going live. Let's get it.